You're listening to the podcast Back to the Real, and I'm your host, Michel Teixeira. Welcome to the podcast Back to the Real, the podcast that talks about how movie influences us and also has an impact on us. Today's guest is my old friend Michel Teixeira. Michel works in the movie industry and has done that for some time now, and he's here today to talk to us about nostalgia. Right? Yes, okay. Michel, welcome to the podcast. So grateful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It's my pleasure to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Michel, and I am 39 years old. I live in the south of Sweden, a place called Malmö, and that's where you and I met. I do work in the film industry, and when you and I met, we were both in the film industry, actually.
Exactly. I had a short career.
Short but beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I refound my love for the film industry and started working with it again. So I now work with a company that supplies AI focus assist tools to the professional film industry.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool.
I also think it's cool if I'm allowed to say that. But yeah.
Is there any production that you've been working on that you can share for the audience?
Yeah. So our service or our hardware has been working on things. I haven't been working on it, but it's been on several different productions here in Sweden and Denmark, and recently we've gone international as well. But for Sweden, we've been on like Tuna Blå Linjen, and Denmark. The Exodus with Lars von Trier, and also Thomas Vinterberg's new Families Like Ours. And internationally, we've been on a few Marvel productions like Ironheart and the successor to WandaVision 2, which is actually called Agatha Coven of Chaos, I think.
Yeah.
And I think personally, my favorite, I shouldn't say favorite, but personal favorite, not company favorite, personal favorite would be Tron 3 Ares. That's
cool.
Pretty fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm a little bit envious, as you know, being a Tron fan, and especially, Disney as well. But it looks like a really cool production. So
it is. It's going to be great. Very great. It's going to be really fantastic.
Awesome. So tell me, Michel, the custom now is that the idea is to have the guest that appear on the show talks about something that they want to talk about regarding their relations to movies, for example, or something related to that. And so my question is, what would you like to talk about today?
I thought a lot about it, and it's a very broad area. Mm-hmm. But I thought about talking a little bit about nostalgia and how that how that really caters to my interests in film nowadays and such, but mostly how it affects us and why we tend to need it, I'd say.
Nice. So do you have like a first memory when you got in contact with movies for the first time, for example, where you feel like today you can feel very nostalgic about?
So my memory is a little bit like Swiss cheese. It's there. I have parts of it available, but parts are just gone. It's mostly memories. Mostly feelings for me.
Yeah.
So I have very fond memories of the Amblin productions, like Spielberg's E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and those kinds of movies. Those are very, very strong with me. Excuse me. But I don't really know what film it was that I saw first or something like that. That's I was way too scatterbrained for putting that into my brain. But I would say that those types of movies and those types of epics are the ones that would evoke most of my childhood memories when I think back about childhood film.
Cool. But that's the interesting thing about the term nostalgia, because I think it was in the 17th century. It was called as a sickness, a disease, and it was due to soldiers feeling homesick that it causes as a nostalgia, and it became a bittersweet sensation. And for some people, nostalgia can still be a bittersweet sensation, but at the same time, it's something that can comfort as well and makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Something about being maybe a bit taking you away from the real world for some time and make you relive some part or some part of your childhood, some part of your teens, whatever, and a special feeling or emotions that you had, and you have a special connection to that. So.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you're very right. It could be both. I mean, if you're nostalgic for the wrong reasons, it can be a crippling feeling that you're stuck in the past and everything was better in the past and all that stuff. And yeah, there might be some truth to that, but it's about, for me, it's about reliving the past that you enjoy, that you felt comfortable and safe. And that's usually our childhood. And for many people that didn't have good childhoods, it might be that the movies were a safe place for them. And that's why it's so important for them. But it's also for me a way to find a way to think about the future. For example, I grew up in the 90s. I'm born in 84. I remember literally nothing from the 80s because I was 6 years old when it ended. But I do remember the 90s very well, and it was a hopeful time, very hopeful time. And at that point, I didn't understand that it was a hopeful time, but it certainly was. And that was reflected in a lot of the things that we were seeing and doing and thinking and all that. Today, we live in times that are much more complicated, to the point where it's ridiculous to even start thinking about how complicated it is. So it's easy to go back to that time and go like, oh, I wish I could go back there and all that. And I think it's up to you as an individual to make an informed decision if nostalgia is going to be something that cripples you or something that enforces you in for the future. For me, it's enforcing. For me, it's definitely a hopeful thing.
Yeah. I would actually say the same thing for me as well, especially the kinds of movies, especially not just movies, I mean, TV series, music, or whatever, but especially movies, where you feel a feeling of optimism, if you can use that word, and you feel like it gives you energy. It makes your reality just go away for some time. If some things can be tough, it can be work related, it can be relationship wise, it can be anything social wise. Just feeling that just for a couple of hours, just being able to relive something that made you feel good once, it will make you feel good again, and gives you energy basically.
Yeah, and also I started thinking, because I was in a little bit more of a crippling relationship with nostalgia like 10 years ago, where it was really like a escape from reality into like everything was so much better back then, and you just didn't think about why it was so much better. And then you start like going through it and dismantling the different things that makes you happy, and it's all about like good memories and how things, for me personally, it was less complicated. Life was less complicated. And I start to strive for that now instead, especially because I now have a son. He's 3.5 years old. And I start thinking about, okay, how can I make sure that he has as little complications in his life as possible so that he can grow up with the same type of hope that I had. And that's why I look into like the old types of movies and media and memories as well from my past on what made me feel like that, and why does these movies evoke that type of feeling, whatever. So I can, there's a Swedish saying called bana väg. It's actually not a saying, but it's something we say, and how I can basically rid the road of all the obstacles for him.
And also in some aspect has shaped you to the person that you are today as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And especially the way you've absorbed culture and the stuff that you like, it has also, I mean, of course, it should shape you as well. And certain interests that you have as a person, especially what kind of movies, music, art, whatever that you
Everything.
like.
I mean, just the fact that I speak American English and we went to Swedish school, which teaches British English, that's 100% MacGyver's fault. Like I watched MacGyver. I loved it, and I started listening to how he was speaking. Yeah, he was Canadian, but not in the show. And, that informed my language a lot.
Yeah.
And then you started with video games, and we had video games in Swedish. And we're like, I don't want it in Swedish, switch to English. And you start learning that. So it's, as you say, it does inform your personality a lot. My humor is from Alf. 100%.
That's a good source. But do you have any examples just out of the blue that you could feel like when you watch it, you feel very nostalgic, and if you have a certain memory attached to it, or something that makes you feel the way you do when you watch it movie-wise.
I was thinking about that the other day, and there's one movie that somehow, I don't know why, but it makes me really warm and fuzzy on the inside, and that's Office Space.
Really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting choice of movie.
I know.
Amazing comedy.
It's a great comedy, but it's literally about people who hate their jobs, and they're
Been there, done that.
Yeah, of course, we all have. But they hate their jobs, and now when I look back to it, I go like, hey, those were actually pretty good jobs. Like, like I would like a cubicle. Could I have a cubicle? I'd love one. But that's not really why. I think it's because it's one of those underdog stories, and it's just a well-crafted story, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've watched certain scenes and just laughed out loud.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Do you like kung fu?
I love kung fu. But also, I think because I was going to do this podcast, I started thinking about the types of media and movies and all that I like watching, and there's actually a red thread through all of them. They have a lot of sunlight. A lot of the movies or shows that I like, it's mostly daytime, a lot of sun.
Right, cool.
And then I started thinking about that. Okay, that's interesting. How about my memories? And basically all memories I have from growing up where I'm happy and it's like super nostalgic, it's always sunny. But we don't live in a very sunny country. So that means I have memories from like 3 months of the year, and then the rest is just a total haze for me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because my mom had something called seasonal depression, and she got depressed as soon as the sun left, and she was born in Portugal. They don't have the same problem there. They have a lot of sun. And I'm thinking maybe there's something biological that I'm super attached to the sun, and it makes me super sensitive to, movies with a lot of sunlight or whatever. It's the same with games, video games. My girlfriend and I used to play a game called Fallout 3.
Yeah.
And both of us stopped playing it because it was too dull to not the story. The story is great, but the ambience was dark and gray and all that. And we just couldn't do it. So I'm guessing there's many different things of why something gets like that.
It's very interesting that you point that out, because I was thinking about maybe not sunlight in that way for myself, but I think what I look back and I feel very nostalgic about, especially when it comes to movies, is movies that take place in space.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why it's that way, but one of the movies I can feel very, very nostalgic about, this is also very random, Apollo 13.
Oh, such a good movie though.
It is.
It's a very good movie.
But I have so many fond memories. I remember watching it in Malmö, Sweden for the first time. It was in the old Palladium Theater. It's not there anymore. It's been converted. And it was the first movie I was going to watch with the THX system.
Oh.
And I remember going there with my father, and the fun thing which I remember so fondly is like, you remember the scenes, especially when the rocket launches, you can feel the chairs rumbling. And so my father had a hearing impairment, so he had hearing aids on both his ears. So I remember him removing them during the movie. I was like, I can hear everything perfect without them. But it was just being engulfed in this story, and especially the experience of it, and especially the historical aspect of it as well. There were so many things attached to it, and I remember just times when I watch it, I feel very nostalgic, especially my interest in space, but also memories of doing something special with my father, for example. And he had a very special place for me really regarding watching movies together growing up, and showed me much of the stuff that I really enjoy watching still today.
Yeah.
So a very impact in that way.
That's true. Space movies also have but I think that's also because you and I are super sci-fi nerds.
Oh, yes, we are. Mm-hmm.
So anything space is just like, yes. But I remember going to the cinema called Downtown, also in Malmo. And it was a cinema that looks like a stereotypical bubblegum 90s place, all pastel colors. And the actual cinema screening rooms weren't that big, I remember. But I saw The Mask there, I think, with Jim Carrey. I think that was one of my first cinema experiences. My family was not a big cinema family, like at all. So it took a long time before I started going to the cinema. And also, we weren't very like financially stable, and cinema was expensive, so I didn't go much. But I remember that. I don't have as clear memories as you have of actually like what it was like inside the theater. I have the feeling of it.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic.
But that's also an interesting thing that you mentioned, especially going to the cinema, watching a movie. For example, there's an old theater was an old theater in Malmö that we probably went to called Sandrus.
Yeah.
And today it's been converted into a furniture shop.
I know, it's shit. I'm sorry. Why would they do that?
I hope the people are not listening to this podcast. But the cool thing is, I remember the arch when you entered the building, and you had the huge camera as well that they used for the projections.
That camera is actually still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just entering that building and going through that huge arch, and you feel immediately nostalgic feelings, with memories of you walking through that, not arch, but basically the kind of tunnel before you entered the main hall where you have the vendors and stuff.
And you knew you were about to experience something fantastic.
Yes.
It was a roadway into another world. I love that cinema. It's fantastic. And it actually leads me to another thing about nostalgia, is that you can be nostalgic for things that you haven't experienced, which is quite weird. Like golden era Hollywood.
Yes.
So in my work, I luckily get to go a lot to Los Angeles and visit the studios. And some of the studios have a lot of those ancient things there, like the going on to the Paramount lot, and they still have the first gate and all that. And it's from the golden era of Hollywood. And you feel super nostalgic and you love it. I was not even, like, my parents were even alive at that point, but I'm still nostalgic for that era, which is very interesting.
I can agree on that one view. I agree with you on that. And thinking of, I remember seeing movies during my film studies at the university as well, when we were watching, like, from the start, the film history from 1895 and then onwards. And the thing is that when I watched some of the movies that I saw there for the first time that I maybe hadn't seen before, I can get nostalgic about the time I studied there. And I remember feeling that, especially the much fun I had during the studies.
Yeah.
And watching new movies for the first time in that space as well made me very... It made me feel very comfortable. It made me feel a form of safe feeling, if you know what I mean. So, yeah.
The question is, if they say that storytelling has always been a part of humankind, that we used to sit in caves with fires and talk about things. I use that loosely. Draw things on the walls and whatever. And I think it's very much an intrinsic part of the human experience to share stories. And with film, we were able to very clearly depict the stories we wanted. The thing about human stories is that it's a need. I honestly think it's a need for us to tell stories, because we tell stories every day in our lives. If you want to convince someone about anything, you have to sell them on something. Like, you want to go shopping, your 3-year-old does not. You have to sell the experience of shopping, how it's amazing it is. And it's a story. It's always a story about anything. But with cinema, we were suddenly able to see what people were talking about. And I think the cinema as an experience, going into a cinema, like you were saying with the tunnel into the cinemaplex and all that, it's a transportation from your ordinary, boring life, usually, into something magical. And obviously for us too, I can say quite confidently, because we're quite similar, that it's about these epics. Like we indie films are great, art house movies are great, but you and I especially, we live for the epics.
Yes.
Like, that's what we really truly love.
I agree with you, and I think it also has to do with the technical aspect as well, because technology has advanced so far in the last recent years, and us being both interested in electronics, we both have a system at home where we can watch movies the best way possible at home, and I think that's also been at least has affected me, not maybe going to the cinema as much. Well, there's other reasons as well, but that's one aspect. But still watching a big, huge epic on a big screen, as big as possible,
Yeah.
that's still such a thrill for me. And I remember the last one I saw, actually last week, was Dune Part 2. And seeing that on 70 millimeter on the big screen and the Dolby Atmos system, I mean,
And with people.
Yeah. Mind blown.
I haven't seen it yet. I really want to see it, but I'm going to wait a little bit more.
Yeah.
Savor the moment.
But speaking of things that make you, I mean, give you the happy emotions, but nostalgia, do you have an example where it's the opposite, that you can feel nostalgic, but you can also feel the more bittersweet, that you can feel a bit sad as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and there's kind of been a trend lately on like Instagram. I don't have TikTok, so it might be on TikTok too. But on Instagram, there's this trend of like, I think it's called Let's Go Back or something like that. So they do clips of things that happened in the 90s. And it's all these mundane things. Like you had your school bag, like your backpack, you had like a sharpener and all that, and you show pictures of that and how it used to be. And they show like a computer science room with like old CRT screens and all that, and then have this melancholy music or playing over it. And you do feel that. Like I really do feel like, oh my God, that was so. It's bittersweet. It's very bittersweet. And then of course you have nostalgia for a time that doesn't exist anymore. And what I'm going to say next is a very Americanized way of seeing things, but I honestly believe that it's true. It's that there is a before and after for us. Our parents' generation and their parents' generation had the before and after the war. Before Second World War and after Second World War. I think we have before 9/11 and after 9/11.
Okay.
I honestly believe that that's when the 90s truly, and the hopeful way of thinking of things truly died. Because after 9/11, everything changed in the sense of we suddenly felt scared about everything. Flying became a nightmare for obvious reasons. And the world got thrust into war in a way that hasn't happened in so long. So for me, it's a very thinking back to that time, 2001. It's very bittersweet. It's very like I loved going to school. I love my friends and all that. But thinking about the experience of seeing what happened that day and then feeling the shift, I could feel it already then. And it's just, I've been proven right since then that everything has been more complicated, more dangerous, and more less hopeful since that day. And it might just be me, but I feel like that's the shift for us. And I honestly don't want it to be like I want us to reshift back to the hopeful times, and I'm just unsure of how to do that, because it seems like you go online, there's so many people going like, oh, the world's doomed, everything's done, and now AI is taking over movies as well. My company works with AI, but we're trying to do it in a very respectful way to the filmmakers. We're trying to make sure that the filmmaker and the tool are working together to create something, not that the AI is taking over. And now we see tools that are literally making movies and taking the human spirit out of it. And it's an interesting time, but it's also a dangerous time, I think, because we have to find that hopeful thing again. We have to have people think that tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday. And I don't know about you, but I have the feeling that in the zeitgeist that's not what people think.
Well, I've not thought about it that way, but I can understand from an American point of view even more. As you mentioned. But now I'm just thinking when you get nostalgic about things that initially might make you happy, but then suddenly you have negative thoughts surrounding it. And I was thinking, like, I remember both movie-wise, but also sometimes music-wise as well. Like growing up was tough in certain ways. I was bullied for some years as well, being a teen. And I remember there's lots of movies that I enjoy from that period of time that have their purpose and they had their place in my life. But then at some point when I watch them, I can get nostalgic and feel, oh, wow, this is a really good movie. But at the same time, I starting to, I might be able to feel the emotions that I had during that time, what I was experiencing outside the movie world, what I was experiencing in the real world.
Yeah.
And then nostalgia can have a negative impact. It becomes this bittersweet sensation that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And that's also a thing that I find very interesting, how movies can connect, how it can just by watching a scene or just seeing even a picture, something, then you automatically can connect with something in your past, for example. And,
it can bind memories very forcefully, like into, you see something, you instantly get that memory back.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to hear that you had those experiences when you were younger, and that you now have movies that take you back to that and that you experience and you feel happy about, but then instantly think about the feelings that you had back then. I'm lucky in the sense that I'm like a squirrel. Like I think about something one day and the next day it's gone. And
goldfish.
Yeah, a little bit like that. So I didn't have a very tough upbringing, and school was not very difficult for me because I was one of those guys that I was friends with everyone. And the second someone wanted to fight me or whatever, I managed to shift focus so that I was not the problem anymore. So I've never had those experiences. So I don't have those types of connections for those things. I do have one of those things, though. That's when my mother passed. So my mom died in 2013 from cancer. And when she was in the hospice, she was watching the TV show The Mentalist. And it's a great show, and she liked it. And the episode that she watched the last time before she died that night, that episode is very hard for me to see. Not that I like binge watch Mentalist, but it does happen. And that episode is exactly what you just said. Great, and what I think about my mom, and then instantly all the sadness and the sorrow and all that. So I do have that, but only with that.
Oh, but that's like you said, that then there is a connection.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that you remember watching it, or like you said, your mother watched it, but then there's the association that you do with it. And I think that's quite common that happens, especially if it's movies, if it's TV series, or something.
A taste, a smell, all those things. We're very good at building patterns, I think, in our minds.
I agree. So, but do you have any, on a positive note, do you have any recommendations or any are there any specific movies that you still feel like these movies give you the best possible nostalgia and makes you feel good or makes you very happy, or especially like you said earlier, thinking of your son getting older, when the time comes, maybe show him some of the movies. Do you have?
Oh yeah, tons of those. My girlfriend and I we've already split which ones I'm allowed to show him and which she wants to show him, because it's very like, you do not show him that. That's my movie. You do not, like, it's very, very clear.
I can hear the discussions in my mind.
Like I'm not allowed to introduce him to Harry Potter. That's her. For me, Jurassic Park is one of those, like, that's one of the big ones. Indiana Jones series. But it's not only movies. Like, I have already started building a collection of like DVDs that I'm digitizing to make my own TV channel, so that when he gets old enough, I'm going to try to recreate the 90s for him, so that he has like MacGyver, A-Team, Airwolf, all those things, and also shows from that era that are kids shows. Because today the kids shows, I don't know who makes them, but they're all hopped up on like cocaine when they do them, because there's a cut every 3 seconds. And it's just, kids are just getting stressed by it. We've noticed it with our own kid.
Okay.
We have modern TV shows on, and it's just like action all the time, or like cuts all the time, and stressful. And then we show him like something old, like Swedish Petson and Findus, and he just mellows out. And it's a big difference. So I think I'm going to try to do that. Who knows? This is like I feel like an old fart going like, he should have my experience. Like
This is good culture.
Yeah,
This is bad culture.
exactly. And I mean, it's probably going to be different, but I'm going to force him a little bit. And if he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. But I want him to see like the old classics, of course.
I'm sorry for laughing. I'm just getting images in my mind saying, but Daddy, I don't like it. You're going to like it.
You're going to love it, or you're not living here anymore. MacGyver is God. No, but
think what you can do with a paperclip and a chewing gum.
exactly. There's actually a picture, a meme online of Richard Dean Anderson. His car broke down. And he's just looking at the engine block and calling AAA, and he's not able to fix the car. And like our whole generation just died. Like, no, MacGyver can't fix his car. Yeah, but I do have that. Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters. That's huge. Ghostbusters is huge. And I'm lucky because my girlfriend has no relation to Ghostbusters. But that's one of my go-to movies as well.
She's not afraid of ghosts.
She's not afraid of ghosts. No, but Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, all the Spielberg ones, all of those things I want to show him. And thankfully, we already have like a little thing going on where he loves watching TV with me. And obviously he's 3.5, so we try to not have too much TV, but I mean, it's inevitable in today's society. And he likes Paw Patrol, like they all do. So sometimes he's like, Daddy, come sit with me. And then we sit together and he puts his head on my shoulder and we watch Paw Patrol, and he explains what's going on to me. And I'm like, okay, he's doing that with Paw Patrol. So in a couple of years, we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to be explaining to him Ghostbusters, you know? And I think we're already building that like thing. But he doesn't have the connection to cinemas, of course, because he's only 3.5. That would be weird, but sending him all the time. But I think eventually we'll go to the cinema. I'm going to try to make it a big thing because I want it to be a big thing. And hopefully he'll like it. If not, maybe he'll like something else, music or whatever. But I do hope he'll like film.
But it's also funny that you mentioned that because I think my relations, for example, which I mentioned earlier with my father, for example, I mean, remember how I got into Star Trek, for example. I remember very fondly, was every Tuesday night, it was the reruns of the original series, for example. And my mother was singing in the church choir every Tuesday evening. So it was just me and my dad. We were having a guys evening, and he made Swedish pyttipanna.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we sat down, and then exactly at 8 o'clock, the episode started. And I remember that we did that every Tuesday together. And I might have been like 7, 8 years old. But that was our thing, and we did it with the original series, and then as well with the next generation. But so that also makes me feel a bit nostalgic as well when I look at Star Trek, especially not just the movies, but the TV series as well, where it originated. But that you have fond memories of it. And those actually original series, neither of us were born when they were made. No. So that's also a thing that you say that you can get, like you said before, that you can get nostalgic about something that you didn't experience when it was live, if you can use that word. But you still have very nostalgic feelings about it when you watch it, and it makes you happy, and it makes you
definitely. And that actually brings me to a point with nostalgia that I like saving nostalgia. And what I mean by that is that I know I have things that I haven't seen yet that I want to see, but I know it's going to be nostalgic and it'll be great, so I'm saving it. So there's certain things I haven't seen. I haven't seen Braveheart.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not because I don't want to. I'm saving it. Like, because there's not many good movies left that I haven't seen from the 80s and 90s. And I want to save some. So one day when I'm in a rut and I really need something to cheer me up or whatever, I'm going to watch a good old 90s movie that I haven't seen, saving that one. And the same with the original series, Star Trek. I haven't seen all of it.
Oh, really?
No.
Because I know that you're a big Star Trek fan.
I'm a massive Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
Massive Star Trek fan. But I haven't seen the original one. My journey with Star Trek started with Voyager.
Oh, okay.
So we used to have a video rental place called Nöjesmagasinet, and they had this wonderful offer called Fyrklövern, which is a 4-clove. You got 4 movies, or I should say 4 VHS tapes.
For people who are listening that don't know what VHS, that was before the DVDs. That was when you had it on cassette tapes.
Cassette tapes that went into a big thing called a VCR.
Video home system.
Yeah, and it was great. You got 4 VHS tapes for 4 days for 44 kronas, which is roughly $4. Great value for money. So I stole my mom's loan card, it's called, and then eventually just remembered her personal number that you could loan on.
You criminal.
I was a criminal because I was too young to rent it myself. So I went in there and started renting all these Star Trek VHSs. And I think on every VHS, it was like 3 or 4 episodes. And one summer, I went through the whole thing by myself, sitting in my like boy room, watching it on a small like 17-inch TV or whatever, and just losing myself completely into this fantastical world of Star Trek, which is also, I might add, a very hopeful way of looking into the future.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's space communism to a point, but it is a...
Please elaborate.
Yeah, no, it's like everything for everyone and all that. But the thing is, it's actually quite nice. It's a very nice way of looking into the future and
the optimism that you're talking about. Yeah.
that we as a species will be able to evolve past the monkey brain that we currently have, and it's great. I love it, and that's been my go-to Star Trek forever. Then you actually introduced me more to Star Trek Next Generation. Because I knew of it, Picard and all that, and maybe I'd seen some of it, but because Voyager was my thing, I just kept watching that. And then Enterprise came. I watched Enterprise, and as with many others back then, they were starting to, do something new with Star Trek, and I didn't feel it was super Star Trek-y. I still liked it, but it was like the theme song. I went like, what's going on here? They
tried something different.
They tried something different, and I can appreciate that. But then you and I started hanging out, and you're like, oh, Next Generation, you got to see it. And then I started seeing it. It was great. And then one day you told me, hey, there's a 4K. You have to see the 4K. And I saw the 4K. I was like, this is shit. Because I could see all the props that were not made for 4K television starting moving around when Worf leaned on a console and console moved like a plastic toy. I was like, nope, I'm good. I'm going to go back to watching it the old way. But it's great,
you should not watch, like you talked about the golden era when the movies have been restored now.
Oh, no, I know.
You see stuff that wasn't meant to be seen.
Yeah, and also like the 4:3 aspect ratio, and we're going up to 16:9, and you're redoing it, and you're seeing things that were not supposed to be in frame and all that. I enjoy it still though, but it's different than your original experience. But yeah, no, that makes me nostalgic as well. And actually, you introducing me to Star Trek Next Generation is now nostalgia because it's so far away from where we are today. It's like 10 years ago.
We have created nostalgia for
we
ourselves.
have, and I think that's the point too. Like everything we're experiencing in 20 years' time, we're going to look back to this day when we did this podcast, going, "Oh, that was great times." So it might just also be all in our head. It might always be great times. It's just that we always look with was it rose-tinted eyes or whatever it was called, something like that. For Americans out there, English speakers, I'm so sorry. That's probably wrong, but you know what I mean. That we actually have a problem with experiencing our current time. It's always more complicated when we're in it, and then afterwards we have all like the what's it called faucet. What's that in English? Yeah. We know how it went.
The solutions.
Yeah, we have the solution, so we can always go like, oh, that was better, and that was. So who knows? It might not actually be nostalgia. It might, but how our brains work. Who knows?
Who knows? Indeed. So, Michel, any final thoughts that you have regarding nostalgia?
Yeah, buy my book on nostalgia. No, it's been great. I love talking about movies and all that, even though in the context that was here was more broad. But I enjoy talking about these things because it means so much to people. Movies I haven't met a person yet that says, I don't watch movies. Like not a single person. I I think it's a human universal trait to want to be entertained and to want to experience something from somebody else's perspective. We haven't even talked about that, but how movies are an amazing form of like teaching empathy and having people understand other people's perspectives and all that. So anything and all that can make people go watch movies and pay for it and go to the cinema and experience that for real, that's a good thing. So having this podcast is a great thing. I'm going to be listening to it every week.
You'll be my only listener. But maybe we can save that for another podcast.
Absolutely. I'll come back.
Hopefully. I hope so. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, please remember to click like and subscribe. It helps me with the channel and it also helps me create more content. Thank you.